Welcome. Today we're going to take a quick look at how to set up, assemble, and use the new standard tilt table bevel grinding jig. Now you get basically everything that you need with the product. You get the table itself, the angle iron, the pivot arm, and all associated hardware except for the tooling arm, which is sold separately. Now you're going to start out, you have to grind a bit of a belt relief on the back of the plate. So you start off by marking that. You just transfer the 3-inch lines down about 2.5 inches. Mark the area that you're going to grind, and you can do this either with an angle grinder. The flap sanding wheel works really well, or you can even do it right on the 2x72. The whole process, maybe takes 5 or 10 minutes. I use a coarse grit flap sanding wheel on the angle grinder, and what you want to do is you want to bevel it down just so that the belt on the belt grinder doesn't hit the back of the plate while you're grinding. You want that leading edge to be between a 1/16 and an 1/8 of an inch thick. So you don't want it to be come to a knife edge. You want to leave a little bit of meat there. You're just really getting rid of some of the material on the back of the plate. Now on our Pro model, this comes, milled. You don't have to do that. So this is what you want to end up with. So the thickness at the edge, somewhere between a 1/16 and an 1/8. And then the assembly is very quick and easy. Carriage bolts get inserted from the front of the plate forward. You can then just lay it right on top of the carriage bolts, place the angle iron as shown, the angle up to the right. They get the 1/4-20 bolts get washers and, of course, nuts. Usually the center 2 holes are good for mounting, or it's a good starting place. The pivot arm gets secured with a 3/8 bolt. It gets a lock washer, which is very important, and a nut. Don't tighten that nut all the way down. We're actually going to use the compression from that lock washer. Before we go there, we're going to insert another carriage bolt. This is another 1/4-20 carriage bolt. And then the tensioning handle. So again, the 3/8 bolt, don't over tighten. You just want to partially compress that lock washer. We're going to actually use the compression from that lock washer to add a little bit of tension to that pivot arm. If you were to lock it down all the way, you wouldn't be able to turn that pivot arm. So what you want to end up with is a pivot arm when the lockdown lever is released, moves, and when it's tightened, doesn't move at all. Now this entire assembly can get bolted onto whatever type of tooling arm you're going to use. It's a 1/2 inch and a 3/8 bolt. The bolts and the washers come with the kit. As I said before, the tooling arm is sold separately. This gets inserted into the second tooling arm attachment on your 2x72 grinder. For most applications, you're going to want to run this tilt table towards the lower end of the flat platen. You want to adjust it side to side so you're approximately centered. It doesn't have to be perfect. And this can be done with the 2 bolts on that angle iron. Just loosen those and there's a groove that will slide left and right. For some machines, you may have to change the position of those 2 bolts. And there are a total of 4 holes in the front of that plate. The next adjustment is going to be to square the table to the flat platen. This is done without a belt on the machine. You can see that if there's a gap on one side, it's preferable to have that as flat as possible. So what you can do is you can loosen either one of those bolts on that angle iron and just shim one side or the other. You can shim it with a small flat washer or shim material. Either way. Once that's squared, You can make fine adjustments to the angle of the bevel just with the lockdown lever and adjusting the angle of the plate. That lockdown lever can actually be moved out of the way. It has a little spring tensioning to it. Now, how to use the tilt table. I start by scribing 2 lines on the edge of the blank that I'm going to use. So then I take that same scribe tool and I transfer a line onto any scrap of wood. So basically that line is the right thickness for whatever blade thickness I'm going to use. Then I go over to the 2x72. I like to use a coarse grit belt, especially when learning how to use the tilt table. I'm going to grind right to that line, that scribed line on the scrap piece of wood, and then I'm just going to check visually the thickness of the bevel, or how wide the bevel would be. In that case, it was a little bit too wide, so I'm going to pull the tilt table out. I'm going to increase the angle or tilt it back a little bit, and I'm going to try another one. And I do this until I get the bevel width to the width that I want on the blade. Now, using it is very simple. You're going to hold the blade flat against the table, below the belt, and then come up into contact with the belt. You want to use a nice, sharp, coarse grit belt. This is a brand new 60 grit, especially when learning. You don't want to apply too much upward force because you could actually force that blank up over on top of the belt. And you really don't want to do that. You really want the belt to do the work. This is a very simple, very simple way of doing things. So you want to bring the blank flat onto the table and then up into position until it's in contact with the belt. And then you're going to watch it grind while keeping a very close eye on those scribed center lines. And you want to grind evenly just to the beginning of those lines. If you grind evenly across the whole surface of that knife, the bevel will actually follow the contour of the blade and it will be perfectly even. So just a different view coming from the top. Now, once you get the hang of it, you don't always have to use brand new belts. It's just a lot easier to learn with a new belt. And just a very quick example of the types of bevels that you can put out with this thing. I think each side on this little blank maybe took 4 passes. A tool like this can really be a game changer for anybody that really wants to improve their knife making abilities. It literally improved my bevel grinding, I would say 100% overnight. The original tilt table was developed by my friend Jason Northgard, and then he and I worked together to create this version, or the versions that we sell, which are adaptable to a variety of different 2x72 grinders. And that's basically it. Those are assembly instructions and basic how-to. By all means, check out our other videos. I've done a variety of videos on how to use the tilt table for recurve bevels as well as hollow ground bevels. Thank you very much.